Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Han Jung-Wioya. Chapter 388. Axe-Destroying King. Part 1. Axe-Destroying King Ho Tae-gang. He is one of the 5 kings, high-ranking officials of the Heaven and Earth Society, and a supreme master who holds the title of one of the 8 stars in the martial arts world. He gained fame and notoriety in Shaanxi province during the war against the Righteous Alliance, single-handedly breaking through the combined attack of Huashan and Zhongnan sect masters and dismembering them all. Not stopping there, he beheaded the previous Huashan sect leader, purple-eyed sword Cheng Wai-su, who was known to have surpassed the wall, in just over 40 moves, earning him the title of one of the 8 stars. Those who faced him all felt as if they were confronting a beast rather than a human, such was his savage martial prowess. Grulul. An incredibly tall man, seeming to be at least 2 heads taller than an average adult male. Muscles so thick that his arm sleeves were about to tear at the shoulders. He was truly a man with a beastly aura. Shadow Clan leader Huan Yaxian couldn't hide his bewilderment at the appearance of Ho Tae-gang, who approached exuding tremendous pressure. Why is Axe-Destroying King here? He couldn't understand why he had come here. However, judging from the massive axe slung over his shoulder and the armed subordinates he was leading, it certainly didn't seem to be with peaceful intentions. The Shadow Clan warrior who had hurriedly come earlier pointed at him and said, "He knocked down all the gatekeepers of our faction and barged in forcefully." Forcefully? It's certainly like him, known for his aggressiveness, but to come to the Shadow Clan at a time like this. Shadow Clan leader Huan Yaxian's gaze naturally turned towards Mok Jiangan. It seemed his return was the cause. It can't be the society leader's order. Then why? Huan Yaxian couldn't help but worry. Recently, Axe-Destroying King had clashed with Bright Blade King after losing his son. This was because Bright Blade King's chief disciple, Wu Horeng, was the most likely suspect in his son's murder. However, for some unknown reason, he had apparently been unable to fully vent his anger and had only taken one of Wu Horeng's fingers. He didn't know why this Axe-Destroying King had come here, but he couldn't let the situation escalate. And I can't let him see this. Dozens of Shadow Clan warriors were collapsed all around the rear garden. So, please wait. I'll go and see him first. Ta-ta-ta-tack. Shadow Clan leader Huan Yaxian hurriedly ran beyond the pavilion, made a fist-palm salute towards Axe-Destroying King Ho Tae-gang, and said, "Have you been well, Elder Ho? What brings you to the Shadow Clan's estate?" Shadow Clan leader. It's been a while. Yes, thank you for remembering me. But I don't have business with you. However, I'll have to make something clear. Pardon? What do you mean? Swish. Axe-Destroying King Ho Tae-gang nodded his head, pointing to someone barely visible beyond the pavilion. That someone was none other than Mok Jiangan. As expected, but Huan Yaxian pretended not to know and spoke carefully. "May I ask why you're looking for my disciple, Elder? Since he's originally a hostage from the Righteous faction, I don't think you'll have much attachment to him. I'm sorry, but hand that fellow over. If you do, I'll quietly withdraw." At his direct demand, Shadow Clan leader Huan Yaxian frowned. He knew the man wasn't the type to beat around the bush, but this was truly blunt. To this, Shadow Clan leader Huan Yaxian tried his best not to show his emotions and said, "Elder Ho. I'm sorry, but whether he's of Righteous faction hostage origin or not, that child is my precious disciple. How can you, even as an elder, demand a faction leader to hand over his disciple like this? This can't be excused with just an apology." Sigh. Before he could finish speaking, Axe-Destroying King Ho Tae-gang let out a long sigh and closed his eyes. Grulul. As Ho Tae-gang opened his eyes again, an intense aura flowed out along with a powerful gaze. Befitting a supreme master who had not only surpassed the wall but also held the title of one of the 8 stars, when he released his aura, the surrounding area was swept by wind from the impact. "Then I won't apologize. I'll take him by force." "Are you really going to do this? I'm warning you in advance. If you don't want to get hurt, it's best not to interfere." And understand that I can't explain everything to you right now. Pat. As soon as he finished speaking, Ho Taegang's fist shot out like lightning. It was so fast that even though Huan Yaxian tried to dodge it with his unique body technique, Pa Pak. What? Puk. Kwang. In an instant, the distance was closed, and he was hit in the chest, crashing into the wall. The single punch, powerful enough to crumble the wall, made Huan Yaxian cough up blood. He truly lives up to his reputation. It was power that drew involuntary admiration. Even though he had managed to deflect some of the impact with the pedal connecting with technique, he still suffered internal injuries. Ho Taegang was known as a being of a different caliber even among the 5 kings. Befitting a supreme master with the title of one of the 8 stars, just receiving a single punch made his legs tremble. Drip drip. As blood trickled down Huan Yaxian's mouth, axe-destroying King Ho Taegang warned, "Don't interfere any further. I'll show restraint only once." Hugh. Why are you after my disciple? He should have no connection to you. Approaching him, Ho Taegang spoke in a whisper, "It's for my son, who must be wandering in the afterlife. I have nothing more to say beyond this." Elder. Huan Yaxian caught his breath and then straightened his posture. Seeing this, axe-destroying King Ho Taegang shook his head and said, "When I went to Bright Blade King, there was mediation from Miss Y Soyun Midway, so I had no choice. But now it's different. If you interfere any further, I won't be able to end this moderately." Elder. I can't back down either. It seems words are useless. Further warnings would be meaningless, right? Grip. Axe-destroying King Ho Taegang then tightly gripped the handle of the massive axe slung over his shoulder. He judged that he couldn't be moderate about this. To deceive someone who wouldn't be fooled by just taking a finger, he had to show something more substantial this time. It seemed he would have to inflict some injuries on the Shadow Clan leader. "I'll surely repay this debt." Paong. Axe-destroying King Ho Taegang swung his axe towards the Shadow Clan leader. He displayed tremendous strength, easily swinging the massive axe with one hand. However, he suddenly stopped mid-swing. This was because someone had appeared in front of the Shadow Clan leader, blocking the axe's path. That someone was. "So you're the child called Mok Jiangun." Ho Taegang clicked his tongue as he spoke, looking at the face that was not just handsome but beautiful. He had heard that his appearance was extraordinary, but it was indeed a face more beautiful than most women. However, what surprised him more was Mok Jiangun's boldness. If he had stopped the axe even a moment later, Mok Jiangun, who had intervened, would have had his head split in half. "Look at this guy?" Ho Taegang's eyes flickered as he looked into Mok Jiangun's eyes. Despite the axe stopping right in front of his face, there wasn't the slightest tremor in his eyes. He was incredibly daring, beyond mere courage. Indeed, beyond being a hostage from the righteous faction, you're a talent that many officials, including Bright Blade King, would covet. "Are you axe-destroying King?" "You?" At Mok Jiangun's question, axe-destroying King Ho Taegang raised an eyebrow. He had thought the guy was quite gutsy for interfering in adults' fights, but seeing him look straight at him and call him by his title, he was taken aback by such impudence. Ho Taegang's lips twitched, and then he opened his mouth. "That's fortunate." "What do you mean?" "Although it was for show, I was reluctant inside, but now it seems a bit better." "For show? Let's just take one arm cleanly and go." Swish. With those words, Ho Taegang raised his axe high. Whoosh. Then he brought it down towards Mok Jiangun's shoulder with tremendous force. It seemed powerful enough to split not just an arm, but the entire body in two. However, Pakak. Ho Taegang's expression froze as he swung the axe. This was because the blade of his axe, which he thought would surely have cut off Mok Jiangun's right shoulder, was caught in Mok Jiangun's bare hand. This guy? Although he had controlled his strength to a moderate level, thinking him a mere youngster, there weren't many in the Heaven and Earth Society who could catch his swinging axe with bare hands. Ho Taegang's eyes sharpened. Based on the aura he was emitting, he had thought him to be at most one of the 5 tigers among the late-stage Earth Masters. But it seemed that wasn't the case. Didn't you hear anything from Ho Jong-hyuk? What? Ah. If I had known it would be like this, I should have told him to say something. What are you talking about? To his question, Mok Jae-yeon answered with a faint smile. I should have told him to at least mention that your son is serving me. At these words, axe-destroying King Ho Tae-gang's face twisted terribly. He himself didn't care much about who became the successor, but he had respected his son's decision to follow Jang Nun-ak, the society leader's second disciple. But who's serving whom? How dare this bastard spout such nonsense? Grulul. As anger surged, an enormous amount of true chi flowed out from Ho Tae-gang's entire body, spreading in all directions, hot enough to sting the skin. He had intended to put on a moderate show. But not anymore. If this was an attempt to mock him using his dead son, he could never forgive it. Axe-destroying King Ho Tae-gang spoke, not hiding his boiling anger and even letting out killing intent. It could have ended with just an arm for show, but foolishly, you're risking your life. All of this is your own doing. By for show, do you mean young Master Na Yelriang? At these words, Ho Tae-gang frowned. What on earth is this guy? Even his master, Shadow Clan leader Hwan Yasean, had only fragmentary information and couldn't accurately grasp his true intentions, so how did he know? As he wondered, Mok Jae-yeon casually said, why don't you honor your son's last wishes instead of being swayed by the young master's machinations? His son's last wishes? This bastard truly has a death wish. Axe-destroying King Ho Tae-gang, furious to the extreme, could no longer hold back and swung his chi-infused axe towards Mok Jae-yeon. Puk. Kuyak. Before he could swing, a fist was buried in his abdomen. Ho Tae-gang's eyes bulged as if they were about to pop out, feeling the power that made his rock-hard abdominal muscles, which seemed impervious even to hammer blows, feel insignificant. Despite being blinded by rage, he hadn't even perceived the hand movement. To him, Mok Jae-yeon spoke in a low voice. Ah. I made a mistake. I got bored waiting for the axe to come, and my fist shot out before I knew it. You, bastard. You look like you're in a lot of pain. Do you want to continue? Grind. You. Wah-wop. Pa-a-a-a-a-k. Then axe-destroying King Ho Tae-gang finally swung his axe with a roar close to a beast's cry. Swish. Mok Jae-yeon tilted his head back, narrowly avoiding it. Oh. His endurance was impressive, bearing the pain. As if he had completely overcome the pain, axe-destroying King Ho Tae-gang swung his axe fiercely, as though he had regained momentum. His appearance was like a violent tidal wave in a storm. Chwa-chwa-chwa-chwa-chwack. Ka-ha-ha-hop. Seeing this, Shadow Clan leader Hwan Yasean couldn't help but feel tense. Although he knew Mok Jae-yeon had become stronger and was the incarnation the cult had been waiting for, axe-destroying King Ho Tae-gang hadn't received the title of one of the 8 stars for nothing. He was a monster who, even when severely injured on the battlefield, would roar like a beast and slaughter numerous enemies. Even though he had taken a single blow, once he properly gained momentum, he had the capacity to reverse the situation in an instant. Puk. At that moment, Ho Tae-gang's chin shot upward as he was swinging his axe wildly, and he staggered backward. What? Hwan Yasean's eyes widened. He hadn't even seen Mok Jae-yeon move his hand, yet Ho Tae-gang's head was tilted upward. What? Why is the elder? Even Ho Tae-gang's subordinates, who had been silently watching, couldn't hide their bewilderment at this scene. They had naturally thought Ho Tae-gang would one-sidedly beat up Mok Jae-yeon, who was merely a late-stage Earth Master. But the exact opposite was happening. What on earth is this? The bewilderment was the same for Ho Tae-gang himself, the person involved. He couldn't prevent his head from tilting back from the impact on his chin, which was protected by full-body protective chi and thick muscles acting like armor. How can this be? How could something like this happen? He had prided himself on being unmatched by anyone in the Heaven and Earth Society except the society leader and that person who also held the title of one of the 8 stars like himself. But how could such a young man, not even of age, grind? Ho Tae-gang gritted his teeth and strained the muscles in his tilted neck. No. He didn't know what was happening, but the guy in front of him was not someone to be dismissed as a mere late-stage Earth master. He had to face him as a formidable opponent. Being tall seems to make it annoying to look up at you. What? Puk. Thud. At that moment, his shins buckled, and both his knees were forcibly brought down. As he was forced to kneel, fingers dug into his right shoulder, seemingly paralyzing the nerves, causing Ho Tae-gang to drop the massive axe he was holding. Simultaneously, Mok Jae-eun grabbed his neck. Grip. Kek. Unable to bear the humiliation of being caught by the neck in front of his subordinates, Ho Tae-gang raised strong chi in his left hand, attempting to cut off Mok Jae-eun's right arm. However, before his left hand could even reach, Mok Jae-eun caught it, crack. Ku up. And it was bent backwards. It was even bent in the opposite direction, causing the elbow bone to protrude. Though he couldn't scream due to his throat being gripped, his entire body turned red with blood vessels bulging, showing how much pain he was in. Huh. Shadow Clan leader Hwan Yasean's eyes filled with ecstasy as he watched this scene. He had been curious about the extent of Mok Jae-eun's strength, finding it difficult to gauge accurately, but this was beyond imagination. To overwhelm a superhuman who held the title of one of the 8 stars like this. Chapter 389. Axe-destroying King. Part 2. Elder. How could this happen? The cries of the subordinates echoed around. Voices of concern, voices unable to hide their shock, voices denying this situation. At some point, all these sounds stopped reaching his ears. Axe-destroying King Ho Tae-gang was truly dumbfounded by this situation. It was even disheartening. The person before him was not an opponent who could be called a formidable foe. He was simply a monster incarnate. Until now, only one person had ever overwhelmed him like this. The current Heaven and Earth Society leader. Is this even possible? He is one of the 6 heavens, called the pinnacle of the current martial world. That's why it was understandable. But wasn't this guy a hostage from the righteous faction who had to fight for his life trapped in the Corpse Blood Valley just a few months ago? He had heard rumors that his martial talent was exceptional enough to come out top of the Corpse Blood Valley, but he thought that at most, he would be at the late-stage Earth Master level. How could he become such a monster in such a short time? This growth rate was enough to inspire fear. Ho Tae-gang looked at Mok Jae-eun's face. Flinch. For a moment, chills ran down his spine. He thought he wouldn't be too excited since he had overwhelmingly subdued someone who could be called one of the 8 stars, but he didn't expect to be looked at with such emotionless eyes. It's different. There's a saying that you can know a person by looking into their eyes. The moment their eyes met, Ho Tae-gang felt fear and terror from a human being for the first time in his life. It wasn't from a momentary display of spirit or aura. It was like a creeping chill rising up. This being was fundamentally different on a genetic level. Mok Jae-eun, who had been looking at him expressionlessly, opened his mouth. It seems you've calmed down a bit now. Shall we talk then? Tack. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately released his hand from Ho Tae-gang's neck. Though he hadn't held it for long, having his throat squeezed naturally led to coughing. Cough, cough. Seeing Ho Tae-gang like this, his subordinates hesitated, holding their weapons, unable to decide what to do. They too were martial artists, so their judgment wasn't poor. They weren't foolish enough to recklessly charge at someone who their lord, who had reached the realm of a sect leader enough to receive the title of one of the 8 stars, couldn't even properly face. However, as subordinates, they couldn't just leave their lord in this state, so they felt frustrated by the situation. At this moment, axe-destroying King Ho Tae-gang, having caught his breath, spoke. I've lost. No, I was no match from the beginning. It was so overwhelming that he didn't even have any lingering attachments. The outcome had already been decided. However, Ho Tae-gang let out a sigh. What he had originally planned was now out of reach. Mok Jae-eun. He told us to bring that guy. Of course, if he resists during the process, whether cutting off an arm or half crippling him, that's left to axe-destroying King's judgment, he said. These were the words relayed by Mo Yak, young master Na Yelriang's confidant. To this, Ho Tae-gang had planned to fulfill Na Yelriang's wishes and then gain his trust to implement a strategy of suffering a flesh wound. Are you disappointed? It's not because I lost. There was no way to explain it. To dispel young master Na Yelriang's suspicions, he had left the watchers who followed them alone, but now this would surely reach his ears. Jong Hyok. Jong Hyok. The path to avenging his son was getting further and further away. It was then. Ugh. Coo. Groans were heard from somewhere. Then, the sound of something being dragged across the ground was heard. Everyone's gaze, including Ho Tae-gang's, turned in that direction. There, they saw someone wearing a mask with strange patterns dragging two masked individuals by their hair. The moment Ho Tae-gang saw the masked man, his eyes flickered. That guy. Although he was concealing his chi, Ho Tae-gang could instinctively guess that the unfamiliar masked man had surpassed the wall and reached the transformation realm. Was there such a person in the organization? As he wondered, the masked being, No Ma-are Hyen, brought the two people and presented them before them. I've done as ordered, my lord. My lord? At these words, not just Ho Tae-gang but even Shadow Clan leader Hwan Yasian's eyes widened. Hwan Yasian was also seeing Ma-are Hyen for the first time, and he too realized that this person, whose martial prowess couldn't be gauged by chi sense, was stronger than himself. But for such a person to call Mok Jae-eun my lord, he couldn't help but be surprised. Where did he gather such a powerful subordinate? Then axe-destroying King Ho Tae-gang sighed and opened his mouth. Now there's no turning back. Since even the watchers sent by young master Na Yelriang had been captured, the plan was completely ruined. Looking at him filled with disappointment, Mok Jae-eun said, What do you mean there's no turning back? It's complicated to explain. Is it because you failed to gain his favor by defeating me in front of young master Na Yelriang's watchers? You? What on earth is this guy? How does he know about his plan? Come to think of it, earlier he had told him not to be swayed by young master Na Yelriang's machinations. Does he know something? As he wondered, Mok Jae-eun chuckled and then approached the two masked individuals captured by the masked Ma-are Hyen. Isn't this rather fortunate? What? What does he mean by fortunate? This had distanced him from getting closer to Na Yelriang, who might be the real culprit behind his son's murder. What on earth could be fortunate about this? Suddenly, Ho Tae-gang's eyes wavered. It seems you've understood. He certainly understood. Originally, he had planned to use Mok Jae-eun as a sacrificial lamb to show that he had clearly fallen out with them. But there was no need for that now. Although it was humiliating to be defeated, he had shown injury and disgrace in front of the watchers. If this reaches young master Na Yelriang's ears, he might try to keep him even closer. He would think that Ho Tae-gang would be even more at odds with them to avenge this humiliation. However, Ho Tae-gang, who had thought Mok Jae-eun was right, let out another sigh. What's wrong? If it was before these guys were captured, it would have gone as you said. But now that they've been captured, how can we deceive anyone? Are you saying we should spread rumors that I was directly injured and defeated? Of course, that was one way to do it. However, the watchers here had heard their conversation, so they would all have to be killed. If they killed everyone and then spread rumors, would it really have a big effect? It might only raise more suspicion. But then, there were 3 watchers. As per my lord's orders, one was let go, so there's no need to worry about that. At Ma-are Hyen's words, Ho Tae-gang was puzzled. He was sure he had sensed only 2 following him. 3, you say? He didn't follow you but had infiltrated this place first. And though he had mastered some special martial art that concealed his presence. Ma-Are-Hyan glanced at Mok Jiangyun. Mok Jiangyun had told him the location of the third watcher and ordered to just threaten him and let him go by a hair's breadth. Ho Taegang let out a deep sigh at this. Indeed, young Master Na Yelriang wouldn't have just attached noticeable people. Yet to detect such a person in such a short time and make the judgment to deliberately let him go, this guy's insight was as extraordinary as his martial prowess. 2 died and 1 was let go, making it even more plausible. Ho Taegang stood up, holding his broken arm. I owe you a debt. Don't worry about it. I can't do that. I barged in here causing trouble without asking for understanding about the plan in advance, and even ended up owing a debt, so I must. I think you're misunderstanding something. I haven't said I'm letting you go yet. What? At Mok Jiangyun's words, wariness rose in axe-destroying King Ho Taegang's eyes. If this monster-like guy was determined to do something to him, there was nothing he could do about it. Then Mok Jiangyun suddenly turned his head and spoke to the watcher subdued and forced to kneel by Ma-Are-Hyan. Do you want to live? At his sudden words, the watcher's eyes wavered. Judging from the flow of the conversation, they had thought they couldn't keep their lives and had given up. But suddenly being asked if they wanted to live, they couldn't help but waver. On the other hand, what do you mean by letting them live? These people had already heard their conversation. If they were to be released in this situation, they would surely go to young Master Na Yelriang and report everything. If that happened, the strategy of suffering a flesh wound would truly fail. Could it be? At that moment, axe-destroying King Ho Taegang frowned as he looked at Mok Jiangyun. He had thought it was too benevolent to not only let him go after barging in on his own but also to help ensure the strategy of suffering a flesh wound would succeed. But now he realized that wasn't the case. Is he trying to control me by using this to gain a weakness? Otherwise, there would be no reason to say such things to the watchers in front of him. Then, one of the watchers hurriedly pleaded with Mok Jiangyun. Please spare my life. If you do, I'll keep everything I've seen and heard here absolutely secret. Then the other watcher shouted, not to be outdone. Please, if you just spare our lives, we'll keep our mouths shut tight. Their desperate desire to live was almost pitiful to see. Mok Jiangyun, who had been staring at them blankly, smiled faintly and said to them, there's no need for that. If you leave here alive, I'd like you to deliver a message to young Master Na Yelriang. At these words, everyone was bewildered. Deliver a message? What on earth was he talking about? Was he asking them to relay something? What message? It's nothing much, just relay these words exactly. If he doesn't want to die, tell him to come himself and bow his head. At Mok Jiangyun's words, the expressions of everyone who had been bewildered hardened. They had been wondering what kind of message he wanted to deliver, but hearing this, they couldn't help but be shocked. This was literally a provocation and a declaration of war. With the society leader's condition critical, Na Yelriang was currently the most likely successor candidate. Moreover, many followed him even if just for legitimacy. For Mok Jiangyun, who was merely a hostage from the righteous faction even if he had become the Shadow Clan leader's disciple, to say such things to someone like that, Na Yelriang and his followers would surely be greatly angered. Shadow Clan leader Huan Yaxian, who almost called Mok Jiangyun the incarnation, quickly caught himself due to others' attention and showed apology through his eyes as he called his name. Jiangyun. That might be too hasty a judgment. Even if we were fully prepared it would be one thing, but to provoke the young master like this right now and give him justification. I forgot. What do you mean? As he was saying this, Mok Jiangyun approached one of the watchers, stroked his hair, and said, deliver this message too. What? If I end up going to him, tell him it will be like this. Like this, what do you mean? Crack. Keck. At that moment, Mok Jiangyun's 5 fingers pierced into the watcher's skull. In that state, Mok Jiangyun grabbed the watcher's shoulder, then gripped his skull and lifted it up. Quoi du duc? With that, the watcher's skull was torn from his body. At this terribly gruesome sight, some turned their gaze away, while others frowned, not knowing what to do. The earlier words alone were provocative enough, but if this too was delivered, how would young Master Na Yelriang react? He would surely be enraged and might try to settle this by any means necessary. Axe-destroying King Ho Tae Gang, who had been looking at Mok Jiangun with a hardened face, opened his mouth. What on earth are you trying to do? I'm giving you a choice. A choice? Yes, depending on your choice, I prepared a path that might be annoyingly long and roundabout, and another that might be a bit rough but is an extremely short direct route. What on earth is this guy talking about? A long roundabout path and a short direct route? He himself had been part of his son Ho Jonghyok's faction under the second young master Jang Nun Ak, and was trying to take revenge on young master Na Yelriang through a strategy of suffering a flesh wound to avenge his son. But no matter how strong this guy's martial arts were, wasn't he just the Shadow Clan leader's disciple? Why on earth would he do such a thing? Tack. It was then. The sound of a presence was heard from somewhere. Axe-destroying King Ho Tae Gang turned his head. Someone revealed themselves there. That someone was young Master Jang Nun Ak? It was Jang Nun Ak, the society leader's second disciple. Seeing him appear suddenly, Ho Tae Gang hesitated for a moment before trying to make a fist pump salute. However, Pack. At that moment, the second young master Jang Nun Ak knelt on one knee towards Mok Jiangun, put his hands together, and paid respects first. What's more, his next words brought even greater shock. My lord. At that moment, everyone present lost their words in surprise. They all doubted their own ears. Did Jang Nun Ak, the society leader's second disciple and a successor candidate like Na Yelriang, just call Mok Jiangun my lord? Chapter 390. Axe-destroying King. Part 3. My lord. Everyone was stunned to see Jang Nun Ak, the society leader's second disciple, kneeling on one knee and paying respects. Jang Nun Ak was none other than one of the successor candidates to lead the Heaven and Earth Society. Why would someone like him suddenly call Mok Jiangun my lord? What is this? Why is young Master Jang? Mok Jiangun was merely the Shadow Clan leader's disciple, without any qualification for succession. If he had shown such behavior towards young Master Na Yelriang, one could assume he had given up on succession, but this was an incomprehensible scene. Towards them, Jang Nun Ak raised his head and spoke with a raised voice. Who dares to be disrespectful to my lord? Whoever it is, I, Jang Nun Ak, second disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society leader, will not forgive them. After issuing this warning-like threat, Jang Nun Ak glanced at Mok Jiangun and mouthed, Did I do well? He was glad to see him after a long time but still seemed to be mindful of his reactions. Go Chan, you came at a very appropriate time. Mok Jiangun seemed to agree with Chong Ryong's words, nodding slightly. Though it wasn't intentional, thanks to Go Chan, who was possessing the second young master Jang Nun Ak's body, arriving at such a perfect moment, it became easier to make others understand the situation. Mok Jiangun then spoke to Axe-destroying King Ho Tae Gang, who was at a loss for words due to this unexpected situation. Does this answer your question, Axe-destroying King? Axe-destroying King? At Mok Jiangun's words, Go Chan, who was possessing the second young master Jang Nun Ak's body, momentarily widened his eyes. He had thought the face looked familiar from the body's memories, but only now did he recognize him as one of the 5 kings who held the title of one of the 8 stars. No way. What's going on? Go Chan's surprised eyes naturally turned to Ho Tae Gang's broken wrist and wounds. What on earth had happened here? Swish. Seeing no injury marks on Mok Jiangun's body, it didn't seem like he had fought with him, so who had done this to Axe-destroying King Ho Tae Gang? As he wondered, Go Chan inadvertently made eye contact with Ho Tae Gang. Flinch. Befitting a supreme master who held the title of one of the 8 stars, his gaze was so intense that for a moment, he wanted to avert his eyes. However, maintaining the dignity of possessing the society leader's second disciple's body, he barely endured it. Looking at him, a strange light flickered in axe-destroying King Hotaegang's eyes. Though he didn't know what had happened between them from this scene and Mok Jianun's words, it seemed that Jang Nunye, the society leader's second disciple, had reversed roles and decided to serve Mok Jianun as his lord. It was truly astounding. Had there ever been such an incident since the founding of the Heaven and Earth Society? A disciple of a single faction, and a hostage from the righteous faction at that, aiming for the pinnacle of the organization. This was something he had never even imagined. Most people in the Heaven and Earth Society thought they followed the rule of the strong, but they all drew one line in their minds. That line was that only the three veins could succeed the society leader's position. Of course, most believed that among the three veins, only the heavenly vein had the highest bloodline and the most legitimacy. For someone not of the three veins to harbor such ambition. The message he intended to deliver to young master Na Yelriang was literally a declaration of war. In the end, this monster-like guy had only one goal. That was the society leader's position. When he said he was giving me a choice, talking about a long roundabout path and a shorter but rougher path, was he telling me to join his side instead of using a strategy of suffering a flesh wound? If so, he was letting him know that he would clash with Na Yelriang in the near future, without needing to struggle under the young master's faction. At that moment, Mok Jianun pointed to the sole surviving masked watcher and said, "I said I'd give you a choice, didn't I? What will you do now?" At these words from Mok Jianun, axe-destroying King Hotaegang was overcome with a strange feeling. Normally, if he had heard such words, he would have attacked or rebuked him without hesitation for harboring rebellious thoughts, being a hostage from the righteous faction. However, the situation was completely different. Though he lacked justification and legitimacy, this was the first time he had encountered such a monster. Would even the Heaven and Earth Society leader, one of the six heavens called the pinnacle of the current martial world, have had such a realm and such ambition at this age? As a martial artist himself, he couldn't help but be drawn to such overwhelming talent. But the problem was still his origin. Finally, having made up his mind, axe-destroying King Hotaegang reached for his large axe, his sex-unique weapon, lying on the ground. Hack! Grabbing the axe handle, Hotaegang approached the masked watcher and opened his mouth. "Your martial prowess is strong. To be honest, I wonder if anyone besides the society leader could be your match. And even that society leader is not in good condition now, right? So you're aiming to seize this moment?" To this question, Mok Jianun shrugged and answered, "Well, even if the society leader were in perfect health, my goal would be the same, so his condition doesn't really matter." Hotaegang inwardly exclaimed at this response. Is this youthful spirit, or is he that absolutely confident in his own martial prowess? Without justification or the legitimacy of being a successor of the three veins, most factions in the Heaven and Earth Society are likely to oppose and confront him, yet he's aiming for the top. Whatever the case, if we hadn't met like this, he would have been quite to my liking. However, swish! Axe-destroying King Hotaegang aimed the blade of his axe at the watcher and opened his mouth. "It's unfortunate." "What is?" "Your martial prowess, and even the fact that you've subdued the second young master Zhang, gives me an idea of how great your capacity is. But you're not the one. If you were at least a disciple of the society leader, or even a successor of the earthly vein, I would have accepted your proposal without hesitation. But you can't accept it, is that right? No matter how much our organization respects and reveres the strong, there's still a minimum established line. If it were a structure where we unconditionally followed someone just because they're strong, do you think the organization would function properly? Are you rejecting out of fear of that? I acknowledge your strength, but you lack crucial justification. Without that, the goal you're trying to achieve is absolutely..." Swish! At that moment, Mok Jianun grasped his sword-deciding talisman and took a sword stance. Seeing this, axe-destroying King Hotaegang hesitated in swinging his axe and couldn't take his eyes off the sword stance. The sword stance Mok Jianun took resembled the heavenly sword technique. However, the atmosphere was subtly different. It was then. Chwack! Mok Jiangun's sword-deciding talisman cut through the air, tracing an orbit. The gracefully flowing sword orbit was reminiscent of the moon, and axe-destroying King Ho Taegang's eyes widened as he watched. Could it be? Although he had only seen a single move, something flashed through Ho Taegang's mind. That was the moon sword technique? As one of the 5 kings, he was from a family that had supported the Heaven and Earth Society for generations as a top-tier faction. Therefore, he naturally knew the sword techniques of the heavenly and earthly veins better than anyone else. He was so familiar with them that he could recall the moves just by seeing their sword stances, but the sword technique Mok Jiangun was displaying now was clearly different from the heavenly and earthly sword techniques. There's no doubt. This was clearly the moon sword technique that he had only heard about in oral traditions. He wasn't the only one who recognized it. Shadow Clan leader Huan Yaxian also recognized it. So this was it. The real reason why Bright Blade King Sun Yun insisted on bringing hostages. Huan Yaxian had suspected there must have been a special reason why Bright Blade King Sun Yun, who had gone to the Yun Mok Sword Manor on the society leader's orders, had brought back 2 hostages. But now, everything was falling into place. He had found it strange that hostages from outside, no matter how talented, were suddenly sent to the Corpse Blood Valley. If it was simply to kill them, they could have just done so. There was no need to send them to the Corpse Blood Valley. But now it seemed all of this was related to their organization? The Moon Vein and its sword technique, whose lineage had been cut off for nearly 100 years. Since no one could read the text within the secret manual, he thought a successor to that lineage would never appear. But had Jiangun, no, the master of the Holy Fire and its incarnation, learned the moon sword technique? It was truly an extraordinary coincidence. Was this the reason, beyond talent, why the society leader had mentioned a 4th disciple? Everything was happening as if it were a predetermined sequence. However, there was one thing he couldn't understand: why has he kept this secret until now? A successor to the Moon Vein who had learned the moon sword technique had appeared. Even if he was a hostage from the righteous faction, this was no less than a joyous event for the Heaven and Earth Society, filling the gap of the lost 3 veins. Yet he had continually hidden this, which was incomprehensible. Was there some other purpose? Just as he was inwardly wondering about this. Ha 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 ha. Axe-destroying King Ho Taegang, who had been watching Mok Jiangun display the moon sword technique, suddenly burst into laughter. His subordinates couldn't help but wonder at his sudden change in attitude. Elder? What's going on? Then Ho Taegang stopped laughing, shook his head, and said, I was the one who knew nothing. No sooner had he finished speaking. Chwack. Roll roll roll. Ho Taegang beheaded the only surviving masked watcher with an axe strike as quick as lightning. This? Huan Yaxian's expression hardened at this sight. Even after showing the moon sword technique, did he still reject the proposal? But then... Pack. At that moment, axe-destroying King Ho Taegang knelt on one knee towards Mok Jiangun, put his hands together in respect, and said, I, Ho Taegang, head of the Axe clan, wish to join Mok Jiangun, successor of the Moon Vein. Please accept this Ho's loyalty and make me the vanguard to take young master Na Yelriang's head. What's this? When he beheaded the Watcher, they thought he had refused the proposal and decided not to join after all. But now he was pledging loyalty, so everyone couldn't help but be puzzled. To this, Mok Jiangun asked with an expressionless face. This is unexpected. I thought you had chosen to take the long roundabout path. Pack. At these words, Ho Taegang bowed his head as if apologizing and answered. I apologize for beheading the Watcher without a word. However, after pledging loyalty to you, even if it stemmed from sincere loyalty, if you insisted on delivering the message, my actions would become disloyalty, so I acted first. Are you saying you acted before pledging loyalty? That's right. I fully understand that sending such a message is a necessary step for you to subjugate the organization by clashing with young Master Na Yelriang. If you understand, why did you behead him? To make sure. To make sure? With your martial prowess, dealing with young Master Na Yelriang wouldn't be difficult. However, even a tiger gives its all and doesn't let its guard down when hunting a rabbit, which is mere prey. The watcher to be sent with the message had heard too much. The watcher who was released earlier has already revealed how much your martial prowess has developed. In the midst of this, there's no need to immediately reveal that you're the successor of the Moon Vein with succession rights, or that you've gathered subordinates. Too much information will only raise unnecessary vigilance in the opponent. He's right. Shadow Clan leader Huan Yuxian nodded in agreement with these words. There was nothing wrong with what he said. Rather than showing confidence and raising wariness by revealing that one is stronger than the opponent, inducing carelessness until the end could actually reduce variables. If you had any other intentions, please reprimand this subordinate for his misguided judgment. At these words, Mok Jianan chuckled and shrugged. There was nothing particularly wrong with what he said, so what was there to reprimand? Axe-destroying King Ho Taegang, whom he thought would only be aggressive, turned out to have more patience and insight than expected. He had thought he would stop at nothing for his son's revenge. Mok Jianan approached him, who was still paying respects, and said, "Since that was your intention, there's nothing to reprimand. Thank you for accepting my disrespect before pledging loyalty as loyal advice. But in fact, it doesn't really matter whether young Master Na Yelriang knows anything or not." "What do you mean?" "Regardless of sending a message, I was planning to go to him directly anyway."